Hey everyone, my name is Reese, and in this video we're going to review all 8 games from round number 2 of the NRL. This is something that I do every single week and have done for years, is to break down each matchup and keep my own records on how teams have performed. So when I'm going through and reviewing form and reviewing past matchups between sides, I'm able to have notes on that performance without having to go back through and re-look at that game, see what happened. I already have that information, and this is a lot more in-depth than just looking at the overall score. So definitely with these videos that I'm going to be posting every single week, make sure you're taking your own notes from these matchups and keeping a record on how teams are performing. If you want to have access to all my notes and see everything that I'm looking at, that's all included in the NRL Bet Finders. Round number 2, favorites only won 4 games outright this week. They also covered the spread in just the 4 games. So that means the 4 underdogs who covered the spread also won their games outright. So we saw a number of upsets, none bigger obviously than the Roosters beating the Panthers. They were the biggest underdog outright winner since back in 2021 when the Broncos coincidentally beat the Roosters. Also this week, the home teams won and covered 4 of the 8 games. And overall, when it comes to the handicaps or the line or the spread, whatever you want to refer to it as, the bookmaker handicaps were a long way off this week. So a lot of the betting companies got those wrong. And that does provide some good opportunities moving forward over the next few weeks, because that means that they have bad reads on a lot of these sides. And to be fair though, there were a lot of complete form reversals from round 1 going into round 2. Also this week, 4 games went over the total points line, 4 games went under. So 50-50 even split there. For my NRL bets this week, we went 5 and 6 from the 11 bets, bringing the season record overall now to 12 and 8. Firstly, looking at the Knights versus Dolphins, the Knights covered the spread and the game went under. This game was an impressive start by Newcastle. They put the Dolphins away early with 4 tries and were up 20 points to nil after the first 30 minutes. They extended their lead back out to 20 points shortly after halftime. And from that point, it was just too far back for the Dolphins to overcome, especially with their bit of a clunky and disorganized attack and just trying to spread the ball to the edges but constantly running out of room. For Newcastle, they completed 86% of their sets, so were very, very efficient with the ball, and they only conceded 1 line break in the first half. Defensively, they were very, very strong again and conceded just 12 points overall. Interestingly, probably my only one concern for them is the 2 tries they did concede were both right next to the goalpost, right in the middle of the field. So that's telling us their edge defense is good, just a couple of issues in the middle of the field. And definitely their attack this year is looking a lot better. Kalen Ponga blending into that back line is working very, very well for them. The amount of times they were able to create overlaps on the edges with him being involved, and he assisted in all 4 of those early tries. Coming up this week for the Knights, they have the opportunity to go 3-0 when they play the Gold Coast Titans on Saturday night here on the Gold Coast. For the Dolphins, this was another really, really poor performance, very similar to their game against the Rabbitohs the week prior. I'd say this one's probably a slight more disappointing for them, and they'll definitely be keen to get back at home this week. This game, as I said, really got away from them early, and from that point, they were never in with a chance. Conceding 20 points that early on to a side that's very good defensively, you kind of played yourself out of the game. And even at halftime, even though there was still only about a 2-try deficit at halftime, you never really felt like the Dolphins were going to win this game. The only hope for them was they could kind of keep it close. Their edge defense has become kind of a major issue. And as I said, they were clearly outnumbered multiple times. And teams similar to Newcastle, but teams with good fullbacks who get involved consistently are going to take full advantage of that against them. So that's definitely an area they need to improve. And it's now become a crucial game for them this week against the West Tigers. Then we had the Warriors versus Eagles, the early game on Friday night. Manly were big favourites to win this game, but the Warriors came out and put them away. They covered the spread, won outright, and this game went over the total. Right early on in the first 3 minutes, Manly, Jason Saab went down the right edge, linked up with Tom Trbojevic, and in those first few minutes, you're kind of thinking, here we go, we're going to see a replay of last week, Manly running up a score like they did against North Queensland Cowboys. But the Warriors responded. They scored 3 straight tries and went into halftime leading 18 points to 6. And throughout that period in the second half, the Seagulls got 2 controversial tries. They're probably very much 50-50 calls that could have gone either way. Jason Starr putting the ball down in the corner as he was sort of losing control. And then with the ball batted back when Daly Cherry Evans scored, when Ruben Garrick knocked it back from going over the dead ball line. They kind of worked their way back into the game, but then the Warriors responded again with 2 late tries to run out comfortable 20-point winners. Interestingly, one key stat for this game when it comes to penalties and set restarts, the Warriors won the set restart count 11-2, and a lot of those coming in the first half as well. Overall for the Warriors, it's a pretty clinical performance, 91% completion rate and just 6 errors all game. When teams do that, it makes them extremely hard to beat. And overall, this was a much better attacking performance by the Warriors, especially compared to what they did in week 1 over in Las Vegas against the Canberra Raiders. They looked a lot more dangerous in attack, especially close to line. Like last week, they just kind of got lost a lot of the time, where this week they had decoy runners, they were hitting the short balls, and just everything looked like it was playing a lot better. Potentially the difference playing at home in New Zealand compared to playing on the road, we're going to see how that evolves over the next few weeks. One thing I want to highlight as well was their defense was very, very impressive, holding Manly to just 16 points. Keeping in mind they scored a try very, very early on. And Manly have been one of the better attacking sides over recent seasons and are capable of running up a score. The Warriors only missed 16 tackles as well against Manly, who, as I said, they are a side that it's very good attack. They scored 42 points last week against the Cowboys. So overall, very good defensive performance. And now this sets up a pretty good game against the Roosters on Friday night, who are coming off the big win against Penrith. For Manly, they made 12 errors and only completed 72% of their sets. Now compared to the Warriors 91, you can already see a major difference for them from that perspective. And a lot of those errors also came at important times in this game. They gained only 1,349 meters. That's compared to 2,100 last week. In defense, they really struggled. They missed 39 tackles against a side who, even though they played better in attack this week, are a super strong attacking side. And with those errors that Manly were making, a lot of the players kind of seemed frustrated throughout the game with that, and then discipline with all those set restarts ultimately proved costly. You can't keep on giving teams chances after chances after chances to score tries. It's eventually going to catch up with you, and you can't do that much defense and expect to win games. They faced the Raiders on Sunday, who beat the Warriors 30-8 the week prior. So that form line's really, really going to be tested here, with Canberra beating the Warriors and the Warriors beating Manly, and now the Seagulls will play the Raiders. That form line suggests that Canberra should be winning this game. However, we've seen multiple form reversals from games this year, probably none more so than in week 1 with the Broncos beating up on the Roosters coming out and beating Penrith the following week. But we'll get to that game later in the week in the betting trends preview. Later on Friday night, the Panthers played the Roosters. Penrith were massive favourites, but the Roosters won, covered the spread as huge underdogs, and the game went over the total. This was the highest scoring game in the round, with a total of 70 points being scored, and it was a real back and forth game. The Roosters started $11 on the money line and won outright at Bet365. As I said, the only bigger underdog to win was back in 2021 when the Broncos beat the Roosters. And this game, Paul Alamotti ran in a try right under the post, virtually untouched in the first few minutes. And this was kind of similar to the earlier game that night where Trbojevic scored, and you're thinking Manly's going to run up a score. As soon as he did that, you're thinking Penrith are going to win this game, 30, 40, 50 points. Roosters just haven't turned up. But to their credit, they bounced back straight away. They scored 2 quick tries, put themselves in front. And then from that point, it was a game of back and forth. Penrith then scored, then the Roosters, then Penrith, then the Roosters. It's back and forth. And then midway through the second half, the Roosters scored 3 consecutive tries. which gave them enough of a buffer to be able to hold on. The Panthers fought back, but couldn't quite get there in the end, and were almost able to tie it, but just didn't quite get themselves over the line. The Roosters, this was a completely opposite performance compared to what they did in round one, especially in attack. Their attack in round one was terrible. It was a lot better with virtually all the same players this week. And against the Broncos, everything went wrong, and they made Penrith, who have been the best defensive side for the past 4 to 5 seasons, look like they're a bottom 4 defensive side. And you could see with the Roosters, and this was one thing I was a little bit concerned about when I previewed this game, is they came out motivated with a point to prove. And Trent Robinson, this team's been successful basically every season bar one when he's been in charge. So that's a sign of him being able to lead this team and get them to put in this kind of performance. They were extremely efficient in attack, 8 line breaks for 7 tries, and they forced the Panthers to miss 46 tackles, which doesn't happen that often for them. For the Roosters, there's still a few issues defensively that they need to improve. They've conceded 82 points now across their 2 games, so averaging 41 conceded, a 50 and a 32 in their 2 games. For Penrith, get the feeling like they approach this game a little bit too lightly with an eye on the Melbourne Storm next week. But overall, it was their defense, which has been the cornerstone of their success over recent years. That was the thing that let them down. They had no issue scoring, but Roosters just kept on running through them. They had more possession, won the penalty count 8-3, but as I said, just gave up points way too easily. And for themselves as well, they've now conceded 22 and 38 points in their opening 2 games. So conceding around 30 points on average of only the 2 games being played. We're going to be interesting to see how Melbourne go against them off the bye coming into the game next week. On to the Saturday games, the Dragons versus Rabbitohs. Rabbitohs won by 1 point as an underdog, covered the spread, and this game went under the total. Overall, this was a bit of a missed opportunity by the Dragons. They were clearly the better team throughout the first half. They are plus 200 meters gained compared to the Rabbitohs. 4-1 line breaks, and they'd only missed 4 tackles at that stage. But all that good work and clearly leading the statistics only gave them a 2-point lead at halftime. So the game was never really in their grasp. Just after halftime, though, in those 12 minutes, they extended that lead from 2 out to 12 points. And from that point, they really should have won this game. But they let in 2 soft tries. Cody Walker, firstly, was able to hold off 2 defenders from about 15 meters out and just drive through to the line. And then Sean Kepi charged over right next to the post. And then the winning field goal, and Jamie Humphries kicked it from about 30 out. The pass over on the left edge went to Cody Walker first. He fumbled it. It was picked up by Havili, who's a prop forward. He's picked it up, found the halfback, and then Humphries still had plenty of time to line this kick up and then slot it from long range. You can see the line of Dragons defenders about 5 to 7 meters away, just giving him plenty of time and not trying to put any pressure on that kick. And eventually, just that final 20 minutes for the Dragons cost them the game. They couldn't close it out, and I feel like it's overall a missed opportunity. They were solid in the first half, but couldn't put the game away. And overall, like I said, 2 soft tries late in the game, but they did let in 3 soft tries. Their middle of the field defended well between the 220s. That area was really good, but missed tackles when it actually counted on their goal line. 5 tries they scored, 3 were over on the left edge. So once again, attacking or putting a lot of their play towards that left edge. So we want to keep an eye on that moving forward, especially when looking at try scorers. And then their other 2 tries were from good support play from Carl Flanagan, 1 from a kick and then 1 from backing up and getting the offload close to the post. They have the bye coming up this week. They're going to need to regroup before playing the Storm in round 4. For the Rabbitohs, I really like the way that they fought back in this game. When it nearly got away from them, when the Dragons got that 12-point lead, they could have thrown in the towel a bit, lost by 6-8 points, and not too many questions would have been raised. It's a game that they weren't really in it in the first half from a statistical perspective, but kept themselves in it on the scoreboard. Interestingly, the Rabbitohs only had 1 offload in this game, so that highlights them really trying to play a controlled brand of football in attack. And it was only poor defense on the goal line, really, that they were able to generate their tries from. And I don't know how this kind of risk-free football game is going to go, especially if their defense starts to slip. Against the Dolphins, they only conceded 14 points in that game, but 24 this week against the Dragons. So that's an extra 10 points alone. And neither of these two sides are good defensive sides. They're going to get a good test of where they're at over the next couple of weeks when they play the Sharks and Panthers. That leads us to the next game, the Cowboys, Sharks up in Townsville. Sharks dominant winners here, 24 points. They won as favourites, covered the spread, and this game went under only just. We had a total of 50.5, so 48 points just going under. The Sharks never really looked like losing this game at any stage. They jumped out to an early 10-0 lead and led by that same margin, 16-6 at halftime. Jackson Purdue was sent to the sin bin shortly after halftime, but the Sharks weren't able to capitalize during that 10-minute period. But as soon as he came back on the field, they quickly ran in 2 tries, and that pretty much sealed the game. For the Cowboys, this was another poor performance, especially in attack. That's really seeming to be a key area that's keeping them out of games. They only had the 2 line breaks and 23 tackle breaks. Only the 12 points last week against the Seagulls as well. With those 2 tries coming late in the game. One of their tries in this game coming very, very late. Both tries effectively also off the kicks against the Sharks. The first try was a bit of a lucky one with a contest in the in-goal area, bounced down, and they were able to land on the ball and score. And then the last try in the dying stages, from a short kickoff, Drinkwater was able to get possession, zigzag his way through and score a pretty impressive try. But, if you watch that a few times, I would say pretty confidently that if the game was on the line, let's say it was 20 and that play happened, he wouldn't have scored a try. A couple of Sharks players, in particular, Nico Hines, had the chance to tackle him, but pulled out of the tackle just for the sake of there's no real urgency to stop the try in that situation. If their attack doesn't pick up, and also there's still, not only they have issues in attack, but there's also major issues in defense as well. They've conceded 42 and 36 points across the 2 games. But they're really going to need to pick up their attack to give themselves a chance against the Broncos this week. And then those games are going to be followed by games against the Raiders and Panthers. So Cowboy season, if they drop the game against the Broncos, is looking a bit dire. They definitely probably going to be 1-4 or 0-5 by the time they get through their first 5 games. For the Sharks, this was a great bounce back after their loss to the Panthers. 36 points, 7 tries, 10 line breaks, all really good attacking metrics. We already know their defense is very solid. And even though it was a good attacking performance, it was probably a game where they could have scored 50 had they executed slightly better in key moments. And there's just a few key stages where they were close to the line, passes went to ground, over the sideline, those kind of things that they weren't perfect, put it that way. Defensively, though, they were very good. 91% tackle efficiency. Just conceded the 2 line breaks to the Cowboys. And the 2 tries that they did concede were both from kicks in broken play. Then another upset late on Saturday night where the Raiders, as pretty big underdogs here, beat the Broncos, covered the spread, and this game went over the total. This was an impressive win by Canberra as big home underdogs. They crossed for 2 early tries, got out to a 12-0 lead, and I think at that point gave themselves quite a lot of confidence and a few eyebrows being raised. But you expected Brisbane to come back, which they did. They evened it up midway through the first half. But then Canberra piled on 4 straight tries to extend to a 32-10 lead, and with about 20 minutes to go, the game was over. There was no real coming back for the Broncos. Everything would have absolutely needed to go to plan. They scored a couple of tries, which made the scoreline a bit more respectable, but definitely not enough to get over the line and win. This was a really good win for the Raiders. Back-to-back games now with 30-plus points, and they did take advantage of the Broncos making a lot of errors and mistakes and being lackluster in defense. They made 7 line breaks for their 6 tries, and only 1 try was from a kick, which is really positive signs for their attack. They did concede 3 tries to Jesse Arthurs, so out on the left wing for the Broncos. This is just telling us that Raiders' right edge defense, so their right center, right winger, should probably be targeted for teams playing against them. This week they play the Seagulls, so that should be a really good game. And with their Seagulls losing to the Warriors, that's now Frank the Raiders' form. So I think they'll go into this game with a bit of confidence. For the Broncos, it was a very average performance. And I think in the same boat to Penrith, they approached this game thinking they'll just roll down into Canberra, get the win, full of confidence, which we saw was their downfall last season, just thinking they already got games won before actually doing it on the field. And we're going to see this game against the Cowboys coming up. Did the win in week 1 against the Roosters go to their head? Or was it just a letdown in week 2 and there's more to come? They missed 44 tackles and made 14 errors and only completed 64%. So it's just overall the effort and execution just wasn't there. And they had a huge drop-off in all their stats from what they did in round 1 against the Roosters. All 4 tries the Broncos scored were through the wingers. So Jesse Arthur's crossing for 3, Selwyn Combo crossing for the other try. So they're really relying on getting those tries over in the corners as opposed to making line breaks through the middle and those kind of things. Then on Sunday, the first game, we had the Eels versus Tigers. Tigers started favourite, won, dominated, covered the spread, and the game went under with the Eels just scoring 6 points. This was a bit of a slow and messy start for both teams. No points through the first 25 minutes, which kind of killed the total. Tigers broke through late in the first half with 3 tries, 2 of those in the final 5 minutes of the half, including the length of the field try right on halftime from the kick return. The skeleton try right out of the break pretty much sealed the win for the Tigers. Parramatta's attack was looking really poor, and you didn't get the impression they had 26, 30 points in them in the second half. From that point though, after the skeleton try, there was another 25-minute period of no points where the teams were just grinding it out, making mistakes close to the line, that kind of thing. Crossed twice late in the game to put a hat-trick up, so it's his second game for the Tigers, and 3 tries. Tigers led 32-0, and then in the final minute, Sean Russell crossed in the corner, at least put some points on the board for the Eels. This was another awful performance for Parramatta, and there's a lot of changes that need to happen in that side before there's going to be improvements. It looks like they struggle both sides of the ball. They're missing Mitch Moses, but once again, that's not going to help their defense. They conceded 32 points against the Tigers, who were the worst attacking side last year, and they only managed 6 points of their own against the worst defensive side from last year. The Tigers are better this year, as we've already seen. They're still that side in recent times. And to be honest, the Eels were lucky the Tigers didn't score 50 points against them again this week, similar to what the Storm did last week. And potentially against the top 4 attacking side, it would have been easily another 50-plus performance. Their defense, they missed 41 tackles, gave up 8 line breaks. And keep in mind, last week, the Tigers only had 1 line break against the Knights. And in attack, they didn't have any rhythm, and that looks unlikely to change anytime soon. It's interesting, Dylan Brown, that's been in the news all week with him signing a contract with Newcastle. He's having the opportunity right now to run this Parramatta side, and obviously he's only one player. Similar to Jerome Luai last year when he had to lead the Panthers, he was able to step up and get them over the line in games. Brown has a similar opportunity without as good a personnel around him, in fairness, and it's just interesting to see how he's coping with that, being in charge of this side. It's not really looking great so far. And looking at their weeks coming up, it's hard to see where they're going to get their first win of the season. For the Tigers, after the first 20 minutes of this game, they were very good. Aside from the 14 errors, their attack was good. 8 line breaks. Their kicking game was good. Defensively, they consistently shut down the Eels' attacking chances, especially on their own goal line, and able to force the Eels into mistakes, putting pressure on. All really positive sides for a team that's trying and putting in effort to win games. And they get another winnable matchup this week when they play the Dolphins. They are going to be on the road and on a short rest. So they're going to have negative 3 days compared to the Dolphins, who played on the Thursday night. Tigers playing on the Sunday afternoon. So there's 3 days difference there, and they're having to travel. It's not a great situation for the Tigers, but it's definitely a winnable game, that's for sure. Then the final game of the round, the Bulldogs, dominant winners against the Titans. As favourites, covered the spread, and this game truly went over the total. The Bulldogs raced away to an early 22-0 lead in the first 20 minutes, and they look like they may run right away with it and win by 40 to 50 points. But the Titans hit back. They scored 2 tries to stay in the contest at halftime. Then the Bulldogs lost Matt Burton late in the first half, and from what I've heard, it's likely to be about a month they're going to be without him. But the Bulldogs, even without Burton leading, Crichton went into the halves, and they still played very well. They pulled away early in the second with 2 tries. The Titans tried to mount a bit of a comeback. Once again, kept themselves somewhat in the contest, but late try to Tracy pushed the margin back out to 16 points when the game was over. It was overall a good team performance by the Bulldogs. 7 different try scorers. After the building that early lead, they always looked in control of the game. You'll never really worry about them losing. Times were just within range if things went right. And it was very good seeing them being able to overcome the loss of Burton mid-game. They still conceded 24 points, and that's back-to-back 20-plus points conceded for them. And for a team that only averaged 18 points conceded last season, is raising a little bit of warning signs. And potentially, missing the 30-plus tackles every game is catching up with them slightly, as the 2 teams they've played so far in the Titans and then also the Dragons last week have both been poor attacking sides from last year. They're going to beat Parramatta this week, but then face a good test against the Sharks. And then for the Titans, there's lots of areas for them to improve. There's positives though, the fact they did score 24 points against a good defensive side. They can take that with them moving forward. Defensively, they leaked points way too easily, especially early in the half. So in the first half, they conceded 4 tries in the first 20 minutes, and then in the second half, 2 tries in the first 6 minutes. So they're definitely going to need to fix those early stages of halves to make sure they're not always playing on the back foot. And this week, they have a bit of a tough test against the Knights on Saturday night. This will give us another indication on where their attack is out. But similar to the West Tigers, they're also on that severe rest disadvantage, minus 3 days in comparison to the Knights who played on the Thursday night. And we see this sometimes when teams have a bye where one side's coming in with a clear rest advantage, but not often we see a significant disadvantage with the teams who played on the Thursday night both getting matchups against teams who played on the Sunday afternoon and evening. So that's my summary of all the games last week. Hopefully this video gave you some insights into how these games were played so you can use that with your betting decisions moving forward. This week there's going to be previews coming for betting trends for each of these games, plus also try scorer trends and players that I'm considering betting for try scorers this week. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you bet on the NRL and you want to make a profit. In the description, I'll put the link to the NRL Bet Finder software. That's also where you can review stats and analyze games, teams, attack, defense, how they match up against each other, get the try score trends, try score matchups, all that stuff to make sure you're making good bets. Plus, also, that's where I post everything I'm personally betting right throughout the season. So definitely check that out if you want to make a profit betting on the NRL this year.